I'm Dave Harlan, 41 years old, and until that moment, I thought I was living a pretty decent life in our cookie-cutter suburb outside Dallas. Sure, my marriage to Crystal had lost some of its shine over the past couple years, but I figured that was normal after 17 years together. What I didn't figure was that my wife had been screwing her business partner, DeMarco Price, in cheap motels while I was home helping our 14-year-old daughter, Jessie, with her algebra homework. The phone buzzed on Crystal's nightstand. She was dead asleep, mouth open, snoring like a freight train after another one of her girls' nights out that seemed to happen 3 times a week now. The screen lit up the dark room, and I could see the message preview clear as day. Can't wait to taste you again. Motel 17, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Bring that sweet ass. D. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. I sat there in our king-size bed, the one we'd bought when we still held hands and talked about growing old together, staring at those words until they burned into my retinas. Crystal shifted beside me, mumbling something about more champagne in her sleep. I should have woken her up right then, should have demanded answers, thrown a fit, done what any normal husband would do. Instead, I did what I always do when life gets complicated. I got sarcastic and started planning. See, Crystal Harlan, née Crystal Martinez, had always been the pretty one, the social climber, the woman who could charm her way into any room and make everyone believe she belonged there. Me? I'm the IT guy with the quick mouth and the blue-collar roots who somehow convinced her to marry me back when we were both young and stupid enough to think love conquered all. These days, Crystal's love language seemed to be silence and Venmo requests. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. The late-night client calls that required her to step outside. The sudden obsession with the gym where she'd met DeMarco, her supposed business partner in some real estate venture that never quite materialized into actual deals. The way she'd started dressing like she was 25 again, all tight clothes and expensive perfume that smelled nothing like the vanilla body spray she'd worn for 15 years. And DeMarco Price himself, 6'2" of gym-sculpted arrogance, driving a gold Escalade with custom rims that probably cost more than my annual salary. The kind of guy who wore designer sunglasses indoors and called everyone bro, unironically. I'd met him exactly 3 times, and each time he'd looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. Dave's in computers, Crystal would say when introducing me, like being an IT consultant was some kind of embarrassing hobby instead of the job that paid for her shopping addiction and our daughter's private school tuition. I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, my mind racing. The house felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The granite countertops Crystal had insisted we couldn't live without. The wine fridge that stayed mysteriously empty, despite her claims of having just a glass or two with the girls. The family photos on the refrigerator where Crystal's smile looked increasingly forced. I made coffee and sat at the breakfast bar, watching the sun come up over our manicured neighborhood. Mrs. Gates was already out walking her ancient poodle, probably hoping to catch some gossip to fuel her day. The Hendersons were loading their perfect children into their perfect minivan for another day of perfect suburban life. And here I was, discovering that my marriage was a lie at dawn on a Tuesday. The worst part, I wasn't even surprised. Crystal stumbled into the kitchen around 8, looking like death warmed over. Her blonde hair was flat on one side, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same dress from the night before. "Morning, sunshine," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "Rough night with the girls?" She grunted and headed straight for the coffee pot. "Rochelle had too much wine. You know how she gets." Rochelle, Crystal's partner in crime, a divorced real estate agent who treated every social gathering like an audition for a reality show. If Crystal was having an affair, Rochelle not only knew about it, but was probably cheering her on. "Where'd you end up going?" I asked casually. "That new place downtown, the one with the rooftop bar." She wasn't looking at me, which was Crystal's tell. She always looked everywhere except at the person she was lying to. "Sounds fun. Did DeMarco show up?" The coffee mug slipped in her hand, splashing hot coffee on the counter. "Why would DeMarco be there? It was girls' night." "Just wondering. You mentioned him a lot lately." She finally looked at me then, and for a split second I saw panic flash across her face. Then the mask slipped back into place, and she was Crystal again, beautiful, confident, and utterly convinced of her own cleverness. "He's my business partner, Dave. Of course I mention him. We're working on some big deals." "Right, the deals." I closed my laptop and stood up. "I've got to get to work. Client emergency." I kissed her forehead like I had every morning for 17 years, tasting the lie on her skin. At the office, I couldn't concentrate. Every time I tried to focus on code or client problems, I kept seeing that text message. Can't wait to taste you again. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that she'd never get caught, the complete disregard for our family. My best friend Russ called around lunch. He's an ex-cop who now does private security, the kind of guy who can read people like open books and has seen every kind of human betrayal imaginable. "You sound like hell," he said without preamble. "What's wrong?" I told him everything. The text, the signs, the months of growing distance. Russ listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about him. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to drive to that motel and catch them in the act. Part of me wants to pretend I never saw the message. And the other part?" I was quiet for a long moment, surprised by the darkness of my own thoughts. "The other part wants to burn their whole world down." "Dave, listen to me. Whatever you do, be smart about it. Don't do anything stupid that's going to hurt Jessie or land you in jail." Jessie. My daughter, who'd been quieter lately, spending more time in her room, giving her mother one-word answers to questions. I'd assumed it was typical teenage stuff, but now I wondered if she'd picked up on the tension between Crystal and me. "I need to know for sure," I said finally. "I need to see it with my own eyes." "Then let me help you. But we do this right, okay? No confrontations, no drama, just facts." After work, I drove home through our picture-perfect neighborhood, past the manicured lawns and the two-car garages, thinking about how many of these houses probably contained their own secrets, how many husbands and wives were living lies, going through the motions while their marriages rotted from the inside. Crystal's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't home. Jessie was at the kitchen table doing homework, her dark hair falling across her face as she bent over her textbook. She looked up when I came in, and I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. "Hey, kiddo. How was school?" "Fine." She went back to her homework, then looked up again. "Dad, are you and Mom okay?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Kids always know. They can sense the tension, the unspoken words, the careful politeness that replaces real affection. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "You guys don't really talk anymore, and Mom's been different lately. Distracted." I sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to answer without lying or saying too much. "Sometimes adults go through rough patches, Jess. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you, okay? Whatever happens, you're the most important thing in the world to both of us." She nodded, but I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Crystal came home around 7, claiming she'd been showing houses to clients. She was wearing different clothes than she'd had on that morning, and her hair was freshly styled. She also had that post-shower glow that came from more than just washing off a day's work. "How'd the showings go?" I asked over dinner. "Good. Really good. I think we might have some serious buyers." "That's great. Which properties?" She rattled off some addresses I'd never heard before, speaking quickly and not meeting my eyes. Jessie picked at her food, glancing between us like she was watching a tennis match. That night, after Crystal had gone to bed early with a headache, I sat in my home office and did what I do best. I dug into data. It took me about an hour to hack into her phone records and email accounts. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know the truth. What I found made me sick. Months of messages between Crystal and DeMarco. Photos I never wanted to see. Plans for meetups at cheap motels. Conversations about me that ranged from dismissive to downright cruel. "Dave's so clueless," she'd written just last week. "He actually thinks I'm working late. Poor guy has no idea what he's missing at home." "Your loss is my gain, baby," DeMarco had replied. "Can't wait to show you what a real man feels like." I had to stop reading before I put my fist through the computer screen. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was the planning. They weren't just screwing around. They were making long-term plans. DeMarco had been pushing Crystal to divorce me, claiming he could take better care of her than that computer nerd ever could. Crystal was resistant, but not because she loved me. She was worried about the money, about what she'd lose in a divorce settlement. "Dave's got everything tied up in retirement accounts and the business," she'd written. "I need to be smart about this. Maybe I can get him to cheat first, make it his fault." They were plotting to destroy my life, and I was supposed to just sit there and take it like a good little cuckold. That's when I decided that being nice was overrated. The next morning, Crystal left the house at 2:30 p.m., claiming she had to show a property. I knew exactly where she was really going. I'd been to Motel 17 once before, years ago, when a client needed help with their Wi-Fi system. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about why you needed them. I waited 15 minutes, then got in my car and drove across town. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, a weight I'd carried for 17 years without really thinking about it. Today, it felt like a shackle. The motel sat on a busy highway, sandwiched between a tire shop and a payday loan place. The parking lot was cracked asphalt and broken dreams, with DeMarco's gold Escalade parked right in front of room 237, like a neon sign advertising their affair. I sat in my car for a few minutes, air conditioning running, trying to decide what to do next. I could leave right now, pretend I'd never seen anything, go home and have dinner with Jesse and continue living the lie. Or I could get the proof I needed and finally take control of my life. The choice was easier than I'd expected. I parked 3 spaces down from DeMarco's Escalade and walked toward room 237 like I belonged there. The Texas heat hit me like a wall, that oppressive Dallas summer humidity that makes everything stick to your skin. The motel smelled like car exhaust, stale cigarettes, and broken promises. Room 237 had thin walls and a window unit air conditioner that sounded like a dying helicopter. I could hear voices inside, muffled but distinct. Crystal's laugh, the one she used to save for me, followed by DeMarco's deeper chuckle. I pressed myself against the wall next to the window, feeling like a character in some cheap detective novel. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was skulking around a seedy motel to catch my wife cheating with a man who drove a car worth more than most people's houses. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them. Crystal was sitting on the edge of the bed in her underwear, the red lace set I'd bought her for Valentine's Day. DeMarco was standing by the dresser, shirtless, his gym-sculpted chest covered in tribal tattoos that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. "Dave's working late again tonight," Crystal was saying, running her hands through her hair. "Some client emergency. He'll be glued to his computer until midnight." "Good," DeMarco replied, moving toward her. "Gives us plenty of time." I should have left then. Should have gotten back in my car and driven home and figured out how to handle this like a mature adult. Instead, I took out my phone and started recording. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a place that charged $30 for 3 hours. Faded carpet, water stains on the ceiling, a bed that had seen more action than a war zone. But what hit me most was the smell, a combination of cheap air freshener, sweat, and something else that made my stomach turn. Crystal and DeMarco were going at it like teenagers, all hands and mouths and whispered words that made me want to vomit. I watched my wife of 17 years, the mother of my child, arch her back for another man while wearing the lingerie I'd paid for. "You're so much better than him," she gasped, and that's when something inside me finally snapped. I stopped recording and walked to the door. It was unlocked, because why would you need security when you're just destroying someone's marriage? I pushed it open and stepped inside. "Afternoon, folks," I said conversationally. "Don't mind me, I'm just here to collect something." Crystal screamed and grabbed for the sheet. DeMarco spun around, his face going from post-coital satisfaction to panic in about 2 seconds. The smell hit me full force. Sweat, sex, and something that might have been DeMarco's cologne but smelled more like a chemical spill. "Dave?" Crystal's voice was shrill, panicked. "What are you doing here?" "Funny story," I said, looking around the room with exaggerated interest. "I got this text message meant for you. Something about tasting and sweet asses. Really romantic stuff, Crystal. Shakespeare would be jealous." DeMarco had the balls to step forward, puffing out his chest like some kind of alpha male peacock. "Look, man, this isn't what you think." "Really?" I interrupted. "Because what I think is that you've been screwing my wife in cheap motels while I'm at home helping our daughter with homework. Am I wrong?" The silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. Crystal was clutching the sheet to her chest, her face pale except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. DeMarco was trying to look intimidating while naked, which would have been funny if I wasn't so angry I could barely see straight. "How long?" I asked Crystal. "Dave, please, let me explain." "How long?" "6 months," she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of fake smiles over breakfast, of her coming home smelling like another man and kissing me goodnight like nothing had happened. I walked over to the nightstand, where Crystal's purse sat next to a bottle of cheap champagne and what looked like a used condom. Classy. I opened the purse and found what I was looking for. My grandmother's wedding ring, the one I'd given Crystal when I proposed, the one she'd been wearing for 17 years. I slipped it off her finger while she was too shocked to resist. Dave, what are you doing? Taking back what's mine, I said, pocketing the ring. You can keep the marriage certificate. It's apparently worthless anyway, but this ring has been in my family for 3 generations, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you wear it while you're screwing around with Captain Tribal Tattoo here. DeMarco found his voice again. You can't just walk in here and what? Catch my wife cheating? Take back my own property? I'm pretty sure I can do both of those things, bro. I took a few more photos with my phone, making sure to get the room number, the champagne bottle, and the general squalor of the situation. Crystal was crying now, big crocodile tears that might have moved me if I hadn't just watched her betray our entire marriage. I'll call the police, DeMarco said, reaching for his phone. Go ahead, I replied. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your story. Officer, this man caught me screwing his wife and took back his own ring. I'm sure that'll get you a lot of sympathy. I headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at them. Crystal was still crying, mascara running down her cheeks. DeMarco was trying to comfort her while simultaneously looking for his pants. By the way, I said, Crystal, don't bother coming home tonight. I'm changing the locks. And DeMarco, you might want to get tested. Crystal's always been a little too friendly with the UPS guy. That last part was a lie, but the look of panic that crossed DeMarco's face made it worth it. I walked out into the blazing Texas sun, got in my car, and drove away. My phone started buzzing immediately. Crystal calling, texting, probably trying to figure out how to spin this into something that wasn't her fault. I turned off the phone and drove to my brother's house on the other side of town. Mike Harlan lived in a rundown neighborhood that real estate agents like Crystal would describe as up and coming or full of character. What it really was cheap and honest. 2 things my life had been lacking lately. You look like hell, Mike said when he opened the door. He was 3 years younger than me, but looked older, worn down by a divorce of his own and a construction job that was slowly destroying his back. Feel worse, I said, and told him everything. Mike listened while we sat on his back porch, drinking beer and watching his neighbor's kids play in a sprinkler. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. So what's the plan? He finally asked. I don't know yet. Divorce, obviously. But I want them to pay for this, Mike. I want them to understand what they've done. Revenge is a dangerous game, Dave. Trust me. I know. This isn't revenge, I said. This is consequences. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past hour. I finally turned it back on and found 47 missed calls from Crystal, 32 text messages, and 6 voicemails. I played the first voicemail on speaker. Dave, please, you have to listen to me. This isn't what you think. DeMarco and I, we're not. It's complicated. Please come home so we can talk about this like adults. The second voicemail was more desperate. Dave, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake, but we can work through this. Think about Jesse. Think about our family. By the 6th voicemail, the desperation had turned to anger. Fine, Dave. If you want to be childish about this, that's your choice. But you can't just take my ring and disappear. That's theft. I'm calling my lawyer. Your ring? I said to the phone. Your ring? Mike raised an eyebrow. She's got some nerve. She's got something, all right. I scrolled through the text messages. Most were from Crystal, ranging from apologetic to angry to threatening. But there were 3 from DeMarco that made my blood boil. Your wife is a real woman, Dave. Something you obviously can't handle. Maybe if you paid more attention to her needs, she wouldn't have to look elsewhere. I'm going to take real good care of Crystal and Jesse. Don't worry about them anymore. That last one made me see red. Jesse, my daughter. This steroid-addled piece of garbage was talking about taking care of my daughter. Mike, I said, standing up, I need to borrow your truck. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with DeMarco. Dave, don't do anything stupid. Stupid? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Brother, I'm just getting started. I spent that night at Mike's house, planning my next move while Crystal's calls went straight to voicemail. By morning, I had a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud, or at least mildly impressed. Step 1 was disappearing completely. I'd built my IT consulting business from nothing, which meant I knew exactly how to erase my digital footprint. I wiped my social media accounts, forwarded my business calls to an automated service, and transferred money from our joint accounts to a new account Crystal didn't know about. Not all of it. I'm not a thief, but enough to live on while I figured out my next move. I left Crystal a note on the kitchen counter. You wanted freedom. Here it is. Don't try to find me. Then I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and disappeared into the Texas heat. My first stop was Jesse's school. I couldn't just vanish without making sure she was okay, but I also couldn't risk Crystal using her as leverage. I waited in the parking lot until lunch period, then called Jesse's cell phone. Dad, where are you? Mom's been freaking out all morning. I'm sure she has. Listen, kiddo, I need you to know that whatever happens between your mom and me, it's not your fault, okay? And no matter what, you're always going to be my daughter, and I'm always going to love you. There was a long pause. Dad, you're scaring me. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need you to stay with Uncle Mike for a few days while I sort some things out. Can you do that? Is this about Mom and that DeMarco guy? My heart stopped. What do you know about DeMarco? I'm not stupid, Dad. I've seen the way she acts when he calls. And she's been lying about where she goes at night. I hoped I was wrong. 14 years old and already learning that the adults in her life were capable of devastating betrayals. I wanted to drive to that motel and strangle both Crystal and DeMarco with my bare hands. Pack a bag, I said instead. Mike will pick you up after school. What about Mom? Let me worry about your mom. I hung up and immediately called Mike, who agreed to take care of Jesse without asking too many questions. Then I called Russ. I need your help, I said when he answered. What kind of help? The kind that might get us both in trouble if we're not careful. There was a pause. I'll be right there. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead and minded its own business. Russ looked like he'd stepped out of a police procedural, average height, graying hair, eyes that missed nothing. So, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. How bad is it? I told him everything. The affair, the motel, the text messages from DeMarco about taking care of Jesse. When I finished, Russ was quiet for a long time. You want revenge, he said finally. I want justice. Same thing, in this case. He leaned forward. What did you have in mind? I want to destroy them, not physically, I added quickly, seeing the look on his face. But I want their lives to fall apart the same way they destroyed mine. I want them to understand what it feels like to lose everything. That's a dangerous road, Dave. So is letting them get away with it. Russ studied my face, probably looking for signs that I was about to do something that would land us both in prison. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. No violence, no property damage, nothing that can come back to bite us legally. We use their own actions against them. Agreed. And if things get too hot, we walk away. I'm not going to prison because your wife's a cheating bitch. Fair enough. We spent the next 2 hours planning what Russ called Operation Scorched Earth. The beauty of it was that we wouldn't have to do much. Crystal and DeMarco had already given us all the ammunition we needed. We just had to know where to aim. Phase 1 started that afternoon. I'd been doing it work for half the businesses in our neighborhood, which meant I had access to a lot of interesting information. Like the fact that DeMarco's successful real estate business was actually hemorrhaging money, or that he owed back taxes on 3 different properties, or that his gold Escalade was leased, not owned, and he was behind on the payments. Crystal wasn't much better. Her real estate license was up for renewal, and she hadn't completed the required continuing education credits. She'd been coasting on charm and looks for so long that she'd forgotten the actual work part of working. But the real gold mine was their digital lives. People think they're being careful with their phones and computers, but they're not. They use the same passwords for everything. They don't clear their browser histories, and they certainly don't expect their victim's husband to be a professional hacker. Within an hour, I had access to both of their email accounts, their social media profiles, and their text messages. What I found there made my earlier discoveries look tame. Crystal and DeMarco weren't just having an affair. They were planning to take me for everything I was worth. DeMarco had been coaching her on how to hide assets, how to make me look like an unfit father, and how to get the maximum settlement in a divorce. Dave's so focused on his computers, he has no idea what's happening in the real world, Crystal had written. By the time he figures out what we're doing, it'll be too late. Don't worry, baby, DeMarco had replied. I know how to handle guys like him. All bark, no bite. We'd see about that. I started small. DeMarco's gym membership got mysteriously canceled due to inappropriate behavior in the locker room. His lease application for a new office space was rejected after his credit report was flagged for suspicious activity. His favorite restaurant stopped taking reservations under his name after several no-shows that he'd never actually made. Crystal's world started crumbling even faster. Her real estate listings began getting flooded with fake inquiries from people who wasted her time and never showed up. Her professional photos on the company website were replaced with less flattering ones from her social media. Her appointment calendar kept getting mysteriously double-booked. But the real masterstroke was the anonymous tip I sent to the IRS about DeMarco's unreported income from his various business ventures. I didn't make anything up. I just pointed them toward the evidence that was already there. Within a week, both of their lives were chaos. Crystal was getting complaints from clients, missing appointments, and scrambling to fix problems that seemed to multiply every time she solved one. DeMarco was dealing with canceled contracts, angry creditors, and a tax audit that was going to tie up his finances for months. And through it all, I stayed invisible. I was staying at an extended stay motel across town, paying cash and using a fake name. I'd grown a beard and started wearing baseball caps pulled low over my eyes. To anyone who might be looking for me, I was just another middle-aged guy going through a midlife crisis. But I wasn't hiding from Crystal and DeMarco. I was hunting them. I followed them to restaurants and arranged for their reservations to be canceled. I watched them at the gym and made sure the equipment they wanted to use was always occupied. I monitored their phone calls and text messages, staying one step ahead of their plans. The beautiful thing was that they had no idea it was me. As far as they knew, Dave Harlan had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a bitter note and a lot of unanswered questions. Crystal tried calling my office, but my business partner Tom told her I was taking an extended leave of absence for personal reasons. She tried calling my friends, but I'd already warned them that she might try to manipulate them into revealing my location. She even tried calling my mother in Florida, which was a mistake. Mom had never liked Crystal, and when Crystal tried to play the victim, "Dave just disappeared, Mrs. Harlan. I'm so worried about him." Mom shut her down hard. "Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have had to disappear," Mom said, according to the voicemail Crystal left me afterward. God, I loved my mother. But the real breakthrough came when I intercepted a text message from DeMarco to Crystal. "Meet me at the Marriott downtown, room 1247. We need to talk about the Dave situation." The Dave situation. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being whose life they'd destroyed. I booked a room on the same floor of the Marriott and set up surveillance equipment that would have made the NSA jealous. What I recorded that night gave me everything I needed to destroy them both. "We need to be more aggressive," DeMarco was saying when I started recording. "Dave's disappeared, but he's still out there somewhere, and he's got evidence of our affair." "What do you want me to do?" Crystal asked. She sounded tired, stressed. "Good. We need to control the narrative. Make him look like the bad guy. Unstable husband disappears, abandons family, leaves wife and daughter with nothing. But he didn't abandon Jessie. She's staying with his brother. Then we get her back. You're her mother. You have rights. I don't want to drag Jessie into this. She's already in it, Crystal. And if we don't get ahead of this story, Dave's going to destroy both of us." There was a long pause. Then Crystal said the words that sealed her fate. "What if something happened to Dave? What if he had an accident or something?" "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if Dave disappeared permanently, all of our problems would be solved." I stopped the recording and sat back in my chair, staring at the laptop screen. My wife, the mother of my child, the woman I'd loved for 17 years, had just suggested having me killed. That's when I decided that being nice was definitely overrated. I spent 3 days planning what Russ called the nuclear option. If Crystal and DeMarco wanted to play hardball, I was going to show them what a real game looked like. The beauty of living in a gossipy suburban neighborhood is that everyone knows everyone else's business. Mrs. Gates, our 70-year-old neighbor with the poodle, was basically the CNN of Maple Street. If you wanted information to spread, you just had to make sure Mrs. Gates heard it first. But I wasn't going to rely on the neighborhood gossip network alone. I was going to make this a multimedia experience. First, I created anonymous social media accounts and began posting cryptic messages about cheating spouses and home-wrecking business partners in all the local Facebook groups. Nothing specific enough to be libelous, but enough to get people talking. Then I started phase 2 of Operation Scorched Earth. I knew Crystal had a big open house scheduled for that Sunday, a $1 million property in the fancy part of town that could make or break her month. She'd been bragging about it on social media for weeks, calling it her biggest listing ever. So I made sure it would be memorable. I hired a company that specialized in guerrilla marketing to distribute flyers around the neighborhood where the open house was being held. The flyers looked professional, with Crystal's photo and contact information, but the headline read, "Ask Me About My Affair, Crystal Harlan, Realtor and Homewrecker." The flyers included QR codes that linked to a website I'd created called cheatingspouses.dallas.com, where I'd posted screenshots of Crystal and DeMarco's text messages, photos from the motel, and a detailed timeline of their affair. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the neighborhood HOA meeting. Our homeowners association met once a month to discuss thrilling topics like lawn maintenance standards and noise ordinances. Attendance was usually about 12 people, mostly retirees with nothing better to do. But this month, I made sure word got out that there would be special presentations about neighborhood security issues. I sent anonymous emails to every resident, hinting that there had been suspicious activity that everyone needed to know about. The meeting was held in the community center on a Thursday night. I arrived early and set up in the back row, baseball cap pulled low, beard making me almost unrecognizable. Crystal and DeMarco weren't there. They had no reason to be. They weren't even residents of this particular neighborhood. But Mrs. Gates was there, and the Hendersons, and about 40 other neighbors who'd come to hear about the mysterious security issues. HOA President Janet Morrison called the meeting to order and asked about the special presentation that had been mentioned in the emails. "That would be me," I said, standing up and walking to the front of the room. The gasps of recognition rippled through the crowd like a wave. I'd been missing for 2 weeks, and suddenly here I was, looking like a completely different person. "Dave Harlan," Mrs. Gates whispered loudly. "We thought you were dead." "Not dead," I said, connecting my laptop to the projector. "Just getting educated about what my wife does when she thinks I'm not paying attention." What followed was the most brutal 15 minutes of my life. I showed them everything. The text messages, the photos from the motel, the recordings of Crystal and DeMarco planning to destroy my reputation, the conversation about making me disappear permanently. The crowd was dead silent except for a few gasps and one, "Oh my God," from Mrs. Henderson. When I finished, I looked out at the sea of shocked faces and said, "I wanted you all to know the truth before Crystal starts spreading lies about me. She's already telling people that I abandoned my family, that I'm having some kind of breakdown. The only thing I'm having is a moment of clarity." Janet Morrison found her voice first. "Dave, we had no idea." "Of course you didn't. Crystal's very good at playing the victim, but I want you to know that I didn't abandon anyone. My daughter is safe with my brother, and I'm not having a breakdown, I'm having a reckoning." I packed up my laptop and headed for the door, but Mrs. Gates stopped me. "Dave, honey, what are you going to do now?" I smiled, and it probably wasn't a very nice smile. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who Crystal Harlan really is." Word of the HOA meeting spread faster than a wildfire in August. By Friday morning, Crystal's phone was ringing nonstop with concerned neighbors, wanting to know if the rumors were true. But I wasn't done yet. Crystal's big open house was scheduled for Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. I made sure to arrive at 12:45, just as she was putting out the balloons and signs that would direct potential buyers to the property. She saw me walking up the driveway and froze like a deer in headlights. "Dave," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting my wife's career," I said cheerfully. "Isn't that what good husbands do?" She looked terrible. The stress of the past 2 weeks had taken its toll, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair limp and lifeless, her hands shaking as she tried to straighten the welcome sign. "You can't be here," she said. "This is my listing, my clients. Actually, according to Texas property law, since we're still married, half of your business is technically mine, so I have every right to be here." The first potential buyers arrived before she could respond, a young couple with a baby who looked like they were probably maxing out their budget just to look at a house in this neighborhood. "Welcome," I said, extending my hand to the husband. "I'm Dave Harlan, Crystal's husband. Are you folks looking to buy your first home?" Crystal shot me a look that could have melted steel, but she couldn't say anything without causing a scene. For the next 3 hours, I was the perfect supportive husband. I greeted every visitor, answered questions about the neighborhood, and made small talk about property values and school districts. I also made sure to mention, casually and in private conversations, that my wife was going through a difficult time right now, and that potential buyers might want to do their due diligence before working with her. But the real show started when DeMarco arrived. He walked in like he owned the place, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent and reeking of cologne that could be smelled from 3 rooms away. "Crystal, baby, how's it going?" he said, completely ignoring me. DeMarco, I said pleasantly. So nice to see you again. How are things at the motel business? He spun around, his face going from confident to panicked in about 2 seconds. What are you doing here? I'm here with my wife. You know, Crystal? The woman who's been married to me for 17 years? The mother of my child? Ring any bells? A small crowd of potential buyers had gathered, sensing drama. Crystal looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Dave, please, she whispered. Not here. Why not here? I asked, raising my voice just enough to make sure everyone could hear. These nice people deserve to know who they're working with, don't they? I turned to the crowd of potential buyers who were watching us like we were a reality TV show. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, I'd like you to meet DeMarco Price, my wife's business partner and lover. They've been having an affair for 6 months, meeting at cheap motels while I was home taking care of our daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who'd been looking at houses for her son, spoke up. Well, I never... Actually, I continued, according to the text messages I intercepted, they've been planning to defraud me in our divorce and possibly arrange for me to have a permanent accident, but, hey, I'm sure they'd be very honest about any problems with the house. That's when DeMarco snapped. You son of a bitch, he snarled, lunging toward me. I'd been expecting this. DeMarco was the kind of guy who solved problems with his fists, and I'd been pushing his buttons for weeks. But I was ready for him. As he swung at me, I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him into the marble kitchen island. He hit it hard, knocking over a vase of flowers and sending water cascading across the expensive countertop. Careful there, champ, I said. That's probably going to come out of the security deposit. DeMarco straightened up, his face red with rage and embarrassment. The potential buyers were pulling out their phones, recording everything. This is assault, he yelled. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said. I'm sure they'll be very interested in those recordings I have of you and Crystal planning my demise. Crystal finally found her voice. Everyone, please, I can explain. Explain what? I interrupted. How you've been screwing DeMarco while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for your shopping addiction. How you were planning to take our daughter away from me. How you suggested having me killed. The crowd was backing toward the door now, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic drama unfolding in front of them. Dave, that's not what I meant. Really? Because I have the recording right here on my phone. Would you like me to play it for everyone? You're insane, DeMarco said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're having some kind of breakdown. I laughed, and it felt good to laugh. You know what's funny, DeMarco? You're absolutely right. I am having a breakdown. I'm breaking down the lies, the deception, the whole fantasy world you and Crystal have been living in. I pulled out my phone and held it up. Should I play the recording where Crystal suggests having me killed? Or would you prefer the one where you talk about taking care of my daughter? Both Crystal and DeMarco went pale. That's what I thought, I said. You know, for people who were planning to destroy my life, you're both remarkably bad at covering your tracks. The last of the potential buyers fled, leaving just the three of us in the expensive house that Crystal would now never sell. You've ruined everything, Crystal said, tears streaming down her face. No, I replied. You ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knows about it. I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at them. Oh, and Crystal? You might want to check your real estate license. I believe it expired last week. As I left, I could hear Crystal screaming at DeMarco, blaming him for everything that had gone wrong. Their perfect partnership was already falling apart, but I wasn't done with them yet, not even close. The fallout from the open house disaster was everything I'd hoped for and more. By Monday morning, the video of DeMarco's failed assault had been viewed over 50,000 times on various social media platforms. The comments were brutal. Dude got owned by a computer nerd. When keeping it real goes wrong, that's what you get for messing with another man's wife. But the real damage was professional. Crystal's real estate agency received dozens of calls from potential clients canceling appointments. Her broker, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Vance, called an emergency meeting to discuss Crystal's recent behavior issues. I knew about the meeting because I'd been monitoring Crystal's emails. The beauty of people in crisis is that they become sloppy with their digital security. DeMarco wasn't faring much better. The IRS audit I'd triggered was in full swing, and his business accounts had been frozen pending investigation. His gym had banned him after the video of him getting humiliated by a computer nerd went viral among the fitness community. But they still didn't know I was behind it all. As far as Crystal and DeMarco knew, I was just a lucky amateur who'd stumbled onto their affair and gotten one good shot in before disappearing again. They had no idea I'd been systematically destroying their lives for weeks. That was about to change. I'd been staying at different motels around the city, never more than 2 nights in the same place. But I'd been watching them, learning their routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when I intercepted a text from DeMarco to Crystal. "Meet me at Sunset Towers tonight. Penthouse. We need to plan our next move." Sunset Towers was a high-end apartment complex downtown where DeMarco kept what he called his bachelor pad, a ridiculously expensive penthouse that he used to impress women and clients. I'd been there once before, when Crystal had dragged me to one of his parties. This time, I was going to crash the party uninvited. I called Russ and filled him in on the plan. "This is getting dangerous, Dave," he said. "You're talking about breaking and entering. I'm talking about having a conversation with my wife and her boyfriend, in their own space where they feel safe and superior. And if they call the cops, then I'll play them the recording of Crystal talking about having me killed. I'm pretty sure that trumps trespassing." Russ was quiet for a long moment. "You know there's no coming back from this, right? Once you do this, you're committed. No more hiding, no more anonymous attacks. This is open warfare." "Good," I said. "I'm tired of hiding." Sunset Towers had the kind of security that was designed to keep out poor people, not determined IT consultants with too much time and anger on their hands. It took me about 20 minutes to hack into their electronic door locks and disable the security cameras on the penthouse floor. I took the elevator to the top floor and walked down the hallway to DeMarco's door. I could hear voices inside, Crystal and DeMarco, and at least one other person. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. "Dave's become a real problem," a woman's voice was saying. "He's got evidence that could destroy both of you." "We know that, Rachel," Crystal replied. "The question is what we do about it." Rachel. That would be Rachel Winters, Crystal's lawyer and longtime friend. The same Rachel who'd helped Crystal hide assets during her sister's divorce 3 years ago. "There are ways to handle men like Dave," DeMarco said. "Guys who think they're smarter than everyone else. You just have to know which buttons to push." "What are you suggesting?" Rachel asked. "I'm suggesting that Dave Harlan might be more unstable than anyone realizes. Disappearing for weeks, stalking his wife, making wild accusations. Sounds like someone who might be a danger to himself and others." My blood ran cold. They were talking about having me committed. "That's a dangerous game," Rachel said. "You'd need evidence of mental instability, witnesses, medical documentation." "I can get all of that," DeMarco interrupted. "I know people. Doctors who owe me favors, cops who can be bought. We just need to create the right narrative." "And what about Jessie?" Crystal asked. "What about her? Once Dave's out of the picture, you'll have full custody. I can provide for both of you better than he ever could." That's when I decided I'd heard enough. I used the electronic lockpick I'd bought online to open the door and walked into DeMarco's penthouse like I owned the place. "Evening, folks," I said pleasantly. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder." The three of them spun around like they'd been electrocuted. Crystal screamed. Rachel dropped her wine glass, sending red wine cascading across DeMarco's white carpet. DeMarco reached for something behind the bar, probably a gun. "I wouldn't," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've been recording this conversation for the past 10 minutes. Very interesting stuff about having me committed. I'm sure the State Bar Association would love to hear about Rachel's creative legal strategies." Rachel went pale. "You can't record private conversations without consent. That's illegal." "So is conspiracy to commit fraud," I replied. "And attempted murder, which is what Crystal suggested 2 weeks ago." "You're insane," DeMarco said, but his hand moved away from whatever he'd been reaching for. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm also very well prepared." I walked over to DeMarco's expensive sound system and connected my phone to it. Crystal's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "What if something happened to Dave? What if he had an accident or something?" The silence that followed was deafening. "That recording will be very interesting to the police," I said. "And to Jessie, when she's old enough to understand what kind of mother she has." "Dave, please," Crystal said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean it like that. I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You meant it exactly like that," I interrupted. "You wanted me dead so you could take my money and my daughter and live happily ever after with Captain Steroid here?" DeMarco stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Coming in here making threats, but you're just a pathetic little man whose wife got tired of his boring ass." I smiled. It probably wasn't a nice smile. You're right, DeMarco. I am just a pathetic little computer nerd. But you know what computer nerds are good at? Research. I pulled out a manila folder I'd been carrying and tossed it on his coffee table. Photos spilled out. DeMarco with various women, financial documents, police reports. Did you know DeMarco has been arrested 3 times for domestic violence? I asked Crystal. Or that he's been married twice before, and both wives filed restraining orders against him? Crystal's face went white. That's not true. It's all public record. You can look it up yourself. Oh, and that successful real estate business he's always bragging about? He's 3 months behind on rent and owes the IRS over $200,000. DeMarco lunged at me, but I was ready for him. I sidestepped and let him crash into his own entertainment center, sending his expensive electronics tumbling to the floor. Careful there, champ, I said. That stuff's probably not paid for either. He straightened up, his face red with rage and humiliation. You son of a bitch. Actually, my mother's a saint, I interrupted. Unlike some people's mothers, she raised me to tell the truth. I turned to Crystal, who was staring at the photos scattered across the coffee table. Take a good look, Crystal. That's the man you destroyed our marriage for. A broke, violent loser who's been playing you from day one. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Ask him about the restraining order his second wife filed. Ask him about the assault charges in Arizona. Ask him why he really moved to Texas. Crystal looked at DeMarco, waiting for him to deny it. When he didn't, something broke in her eyes. It's not what you think, DeMarco said weakly. Those women, they were crazy. They made things up. All of them? I asked. 4 different women in 3 different states, and they all just happened to be crazy? The fight went out of Crystal like air from a punctured balloon. She sank into DeMarco's leather couch, staring at the photos like they were evidence of her own stupidity. Why? She asked, and I wasn't sure if she was talking to me or DeMarco. Why what? I replied. Why did I find out? Why did I care? Why didn't I just roll over and let you destroy my life? Why did you have to ruin everything? I stared at her for a long moment, this woman I'd loved for 17 years, who'd given me the most precious thing in my life, who'd thrown it all away for a man who probably would have dumped her the moment he got bored. I didn't ruin anything, Crystal. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. I picked up the photos and put them back in the folder. Rachel, I said to the lawyer, who'd been trying to make herself invisible in the corner, I'd recommend you distance yourself from these 2 before their stupidity becomes legally contagious. I headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at them one more time. Oh, and DeMarco, you might want to check your car. I think someone filled the air conditioning vents with shrimp. As I walked out, I could hear Crystal screaming at DeMarco, demanding answers about the restraining orders and the assault charges. Their perfect partnership was imploding in real time, but I still wasn't done with them. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up in my motel room to find 17 missed calls from Crystal and 43 text messages ranging from apologetic to threatening to completely unhinged. The final message, sent at 3:47 a.m., simply read, I hate you. Good. Hate was honest. Hate was real. Hate was better than the fake love she'd been serving me for months while she screwed around with DeMarco. I was done hiding, done playing games, done being the nice guy who got walked all over. It was time for the grand finale. I called Russ and told him to meet me at the storage unit where I'd been keeping all my evidence. When he arrived, I was sitting on a folding chair surrounded by boxes of documents, photos, recordings, and financial records. Jesus, Dave, he said, looking around. This looks like a serial killer's lair. It's justice, I replied. Organized, documented, legally bulletproof justice. What's the plan? I smiled. We're going to give Crystal and DeMarco exactly what they deserve, a public reckoning that will follow them for the rest of their lives. The plan was simple in its brutality. I was going to expose everything all at once in a way that would make it impossible for them to recover or rebuild their reputations. First, I created a website called thetruthaboutcrystalharlan.com and uploaded everything: the photos from the motel, the recordings of their conversations, the evidence of DeMarco's criminal history, the financial documents showing their various frauds and deceptions. But I didn't stop there. I bought advertising space on every major social media platform, targeting people in our area with ads that simply read, "Before you hire Crystal Harlan as your realtor, learn the truth about who she really is." I sent copies of all the evidence to Crystal's real estate broker, DeMarco's creditors, and every business they'd ever worked with. I mailed anonymous packages to our neighbors containing printed copies of their most damning text messages and photos. But the masterpiece was the video. I'd been recording everything for weeks. Crystal's lies, DeMarco's threats, their pathetic attempts to justify their behavior. I edited it all together into a 20-minute documentary that I titled The Ring and the Wreck: How My Wife and Her Lover Destroyed Their Own Lives. The video opened with a photo of our wedding day, Crystal and me, young and happy and full of hope for the future. Then it cut to the text message that started it all. Can't wait to taste you again. I narrated the whole thing in a calm, matter-of-fact voice, letting their own words condemn them. The motel photos, the recordings of them planning my destruction, the evidence of DeMarco's violent past, Crystal's suggestion that I should have an accident. I ended the video with a simple message. This is what happens when you try to destroy an innocent person's life. Actions have consequences, and some consequences last forever. I uploaded the video to YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and every other platform I could think of. Then I sent the link to everyone in our contact list: friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, clients. Within 6 hours, the video had been viewed over 100,000 times. By the end of the day, it had gone viral. The comments were brutal. This woman is pure evil. That guy DeMarco looks like a walking STD. Dave, you're better off without that trash. Someone should send this to every real estate agency in Texas. But the real satisfaction came from watching their worlds collapse in real time. Crystal's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Her broker fired her via email, citing conduct detrimental to the agency's reputation. 3 of her biggest clients canceled their listings and demanded refunds. DeMarco's business partners dissolved their partnership and sued him for fraud. His landlord evicted him from his office space. His gym membership was permanently revoked, and several other facilities banned him preemptively. But I wasn't done yet. I'd saved the best for last. I arranged to meet Crystal at a public park near our house-neutral ground, where she couldn't cause a scene without witnesses. She showed up looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red from crying or drinking or both. "Dave," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, we need to talk." "Talk," I said. "I'm listening. I made a mistake, a terrible, horrible mistake. But we can get through this. We can go to counseling, work things out." "Work things out?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Crystal, you suggested having me killed. You planned to steal my daughter and my money and run off with a violent criminal. What exactly is there to work out? I never meant for it to go this far. DeMarco, he manipulated me, made me think things that weren't true." "Like what? That I was a boring husband who didn't deserve your loyalty? That our marriage vows were just suggestions? That our daughter would be better off with a stepfather who beats women?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I didn't know about his past. I swear, Dave, I had no idea." "You didn't want to know. You were too busy enjoying the attention of a younger man with a nice car and a gym membership." I pulled out a small velvet box and set it on the picnic table between us. "What's that?" she asked. "Your engagement ring. The one I took back from the motel. I had it appraised." She opened the box with shaking hands. The ring was there, but it looked different. Smaller, somehow. "The diamond was fake," I said conversationally. "Has been for about 2 years. You sold the real one and had it replaced with cubic zirconia. I'm guessing you needed money for your secret apartment or your shopping sprees or whatever other lies you were living." Her face crumpled. "Dave, I can explain." "No need. I understand perfectly. You've been stealing from our family to fund your affair. The only question is how much else you took that I haven't found yet." I stood up and walked around to her side of the table. "But here's the thing, Crystal. I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. I don't want counseling or second chances or any of the other things cheating spouses say when they get caught." I took the ring box from her hands and dumped the contents into my palm. "What I want is for you to understand that actions have consequences." I threw the fake ring as hard as I could into the pond at the center of the park. It disappeared with a small splash, leaving only ripples on the surface. "That's what you did to our marriage," I said. "You threw it away for something worthless." Crystal was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "Dave, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. I've always loved you." "No," I said quietly. "You loved the idea of me, the security, the stability, the nice house in the suburbs, but you never loved me enough to be faithful to me." I walked back to my side of the table and picked up my phone. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm seeking full custody of Jessie. And given the evidence I have, I'll probably get it. You can have whatever's left after the lawyers are done. You can't take Jessie away from me. She's my daughter. She's our daughter. But she deserves better than a mother who plots to kill her father. I started to walk away, then stopped and looked back at her one more time. By the way, DeMarco's in jail. Apparently, one of his ex-wives saw the video and decided to press charges for that assault in Arizona. He's looking at 2 to 5 years. Crystal's face went white. That's not possible. It's amazing what happens when the truth finally comes out. Turns out DeMarco's been running from his past for years, and my little video gave his victims the courage to come forward. I left her sitting at that picnic table, surrounded by the wreckage of her own choices. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I got full custody of Jessie, the house, and most of our assets. Crystal got a job at a discount real estate agency in a different city, where hopefully no one had seen the video that destroyed her reputation. Jessie and I are doing fine. Better than fine, actually. We moved to a new house across town, away from the memories and the gossip. She's in therapy to deal with everything that happened, but she's resilient. Kids usually are. As for me, I learned something important about myself during those dark months. I learned that there's a difference between being nice and being weak. I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. And I learned that some people will mistake your kindness for stupidity right up until the moment you prove them wrong. Crystal wanted freedom from our boring marriage. DeMarco wanted to take everything I'd worked for. They both got exactly what they deserved. Nothing. Turns out the only thing Crystal could flip faster than a house was her life, and I'm not picking up the pieces.